What's going on, guys? I'm Pete, and welcome to Retro Game Addict. So recently I picked up a teal Game Boy Color off of Facebook Marketplace with just one problem. It has no sound. Now, I've read that speaker replacement is a pretty straightforward process on here. I have no experience with soldering, but I figured I'd give it a shot, so let's get into it. So we'll start out by testing a game. I'm going to try out Revenge of the Gator. So let's pop it in. And the game works, so that's a good sign. So there's pretty much no sound coming from the speaker. It's like little just popping noises with like little faint remnants of the music. So to rule anything out, I'm gonna pop in some headphones and we'll try these old school iPod earbuds. So the music is working through the headphone jack, which is a good sign, and to me that indicates that it's probably a bad speaker. I'm not gonna go nuts with testing with the multimeter or anything. I'm just gonna dive right into it and replace that speaker. We'll start by removing the battery cover and popping those AA batteries out, and we'll take the game out. So there are 6 tri-wing security screws holding the back cover on, and I'm just using a generic tri-wing security screwdriver that I bought off of Amazon, and I'll throw a link to it in the description. So let's pop those 6 screws off. Now that we have the screws removed, we can split the casing open here, and as you can see, the back cover just comes right off. There are 3 small Phillips screws holding the motherboard in, so we'll remove those pretty quickly. And I'll throw those removed screws in the magnetic tray so we don't lose them. And then at the top of the unit, there's a small ribbon cable with just 2 tabs holding it in place. So I'm just going to take a small precision flathead screwdriver and push those tabs up. And then from there, you can just pull the ribbon cable out very gently. And now the motherboard is free. And here now you can see the front half of the speaker. It looks like it has some brown discoloration and cracking and corrosion. It's pretty nasty, and that's probably the culprit. So my replacement Game Boy Color speaker came from Funny Playing. I'll throw a link to them in the description. It looks a lot cooler, and I like the clear plastic. And I'm just going to line it up closer to the original speaker that we're going to replace. And it looks like it's a pretty good fit. So let's get started with soldering. I'm going to use some desoldering wire to soak up the old solder that's holding on the original speaker. I have a pair of tweezers for pulling the old speaker wire off. I am totally new to soldering, so I just bought a cheap kit off of Amazon. I set the iron to 450 degrees and used the smallest tip in the kit. I set the tip of the iron on the soldering point to heat up the old solder and soaked it up with the desoldering wire and worked at it for a little while. And eventually I heated the solder up enough where I was able to pull the old speaker wire out. And I did the best that I could to soak up the remaining solder. So I moved on to the first solder point, I held it in place for a little while, and the wire actually just eventually fell out. So from there I cleaned it up a little bit. I actually used some rubbing alcohol too to clean up any imperfections that I had. And here's a close-up of the original speaker. And here's a little side-by-side of the original speaker and the replacement speaker. So I soaked up as much solder as I could to make a hole to stick the new speaker wire through. And again, I'm not a pro here, and I did the best that I could. So we got the new one lined up here, and I'm going to do one wire at a time. I heated up the new solder wire, so I put the flux on the solder point and then began soldering. So I tried to heat up the work area and not actually make contact with the new solder wire. And again, I just worked at it as much as I could. It took a little while, but I eventually got it and filled in that hole as best as I could. And then I repeated the process with the second one, and then I went ahead and put that new solder on there. And it worked out okay. It's definitely sloppy, but I cleaned up the area again with isopropyl alcohol, and it seemed to be making contact, which is great, and it held the new speaker on in place. Assembly is just the reverse of disassembly. I situated the new speaker in there. Everything seemed to line up pretty well. I popped in that ribbon cable. I popped those 3 Phillips head screws back in, and then situated the back cover on, and then reinstalled those 6 tri-wing screws, and everything seemed to line up pretty good. So I reinstalled the batteries and popped in Revenge of the Gator. And moment of truth. It made the startup noise, so that's an awesome sign. And this thing sounds great. It's actually working. Wow, I'm actually a little impressed with myself. That's awesome. I'll play the game a little bit here just to make sure it's still making contact and everything's good to go. And it seems to be working great. And that was my Game Boy Color speaker replacement as a total soldering rookie. I'm sure there are plenty of things I could have done better, and I think a better soldering iron and just a better setup would have made my life a little bit easier. But all in all, I'm super pumped that I was able to get it going. It was a bit easier than I thought it was going to be, and I think I'm going to continue to mess around with soldering. So what did you guys think? I'm sure there are plenty of tips out there to help me improve, so please let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for checking out Retro Game Addict. I seriously appreciate you all, and I'll catch you on the next one. Later.